Imagine for a second that the apocalypse hits.
Mm.
Right now, today.
Mm.
But your final moments on the surface of the earth don't involve, going out in some heroic blaze of glory.
Right, or having this profound cinematic final realization about life.
Exactly. Instead, you are caught outside, standing in the freezing cold in absolutely nothing but your underwear. And you're holding your ex-girlfriend's prize-winning Persian show cat, Princess Donut the Queen Anne Chonk.
Which is honestly one of the most specific and wonderfully absurd ways to begin the end of the world.
Okay, let's unpack this right away, because that is the exact premise that kicks off Mett Diniman's dungeon crawler, Carl. And that's the focus of our deep dive today.
Yeah, and we've got a fantastic set of sources to go through, including a really detailed interview with Diniman himself.
We really do. He's managed to take what sounds like this frantic fever dream and turn it into a total cultural juggernaut.
It is a fascinating case study. I mean, he just released the 8th book in this series, which is called A Parade of Horribles. But the broader context here is the meteoric rise of a genre called lit RPG.
Lit RPG, right, which stands for literary role-playing game.
Exactly.
And for anyone listening who hasn't stumbled into this specific corner of the internet yet, we should probably clarify how that actually works on the page. Because it's not just like a fantasy book where people happen to play a game.
No, not at all. Lit RPG integrates actual video game mechanics directly into the narrative structure. So as you're reading, the characters are literally seeing their stats.
Like strength, agility, intelligence, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. They have health bars, they manage inventory systems, they actually get visual notification prompts when they level up or earn a new skill.
Wow.
The rules of a video game are the literal physics of the universe they are surviving in, and for a long time, this was incredibly niche.
Like mostly hardcore tabletop gamers and, very specific fan fiction communities.
Right. But series like Carl have just completely cracked the code, bringing those mechanics to a massive mainstream audience.
We're talking millions of devoted fans here. I mean, there is a dedicated real-world candy bar based on a cocktail from the books. Princess Donut's Virgin Dirty Shirley.
That is still so wild to me.
It's crazy. And, perhaps most significantly, we are talking about a major television deal currently in development for Peacock. It's being produced by Seta Macfarlane's production company, Fuzzy Door.
The trajectory from this underground internet subculture to mainstream television development is just staggering.
So the mission for us today, for you listening, is to map out how exactly this happened. How did a quirky, self-published project transform into this massive multimedia franchise?
Especially since he literally just wrote the first one as a quick palate cleanser between his other books.
Right. So we're going to extract what Diniman's incredibly weird journey teaches us about creativity, about community building, and honestly, about surviving against absolutely impossible odds.
Well, to understand why this extremely specific story resonates with so many people, we first need to look at the flavor of the apocalypse Diniman created.
Because it's surprisingly relatable, right? Even though the premise is wild.
Completely wild. I mean, the aliens arrive, and in the very first paragraph of the very first book, they collapse a world. Every structure on Earth is flattened.
Yeah, 99% of humanity is instantly wiped out, just gone.
And the survivors who happen to be outside are presented with this horrific choice. You can stay on the surface of a ruined planet and face certain death by starvation or exposure.
Or you can enter a subterranean, multi-level, gamified video game dungeon.
Right, where you have to fight monsters to the death. But the critical detail is why you are fighting.
It's not just for survival.
Exactly, you are fighting for ratings. The entire dungeon is a reality television show.
That is such a dark concept.
Yeah.
The trauma of the survivors is being broadcast live for the entertainment of a massive intergalactic television audience.
And Diniman plays with this theme of performative suffering quite a bit across his work.
Oh, like in a standalone sci-fi book, right? Operation Bounce House.
Yes, where the protagonist, Oliver, and his robot companion, Roger, have to fight off invading gamers from Earth, who view their reality as just a playground.
It's definitely a recurring obsession for him. This idea of life or death struggles being treated as a casual game by an uncaring audience.
What's fascinating here is how Diniman frames this dynamic, because the bad guys aren't your typical villains.
Right. They aren't mustache-twirling comic book bad guys plotting to destroy the universe because they're just inherently evil.
No, Diniman calls his concept realistic cosmic horror. And that is such a sharp, insightful distinction.
Let me just jump in, because Diniman describes these antagonists as massive bureaucratic corporate entities, right? It's an entire alien civilization acting like a nightmare scenario of middle management.
Yes, it's not one dark overlord. It's a smooshed together group of alien corporate employees who are all just terrified of getting fired by the person above them.
So instead of giant, incomprehensible tentacle monsters from beyond the stars driving you mad.
Like traditional H.P. Lovecraft stuff, exactly.
Right. Diniman is saying, no, the most incomprehensible, terrifying monster in the universe is actually just bureaucracy.
It's brilliant. Evil isn't always intentional malice. Sometimes evil is just the inevitable byproduct of a massive corporate machine that prioritizes profit margins over community well-being.
Let me put it this way for you listening. It's like trying to get a life-saving medical procedure approved, but your insurance claim gets denied by an automated algorithmic system.
Oh, that is the worst feeling.
And you can't get a human on the phone to fix it. Only multiply that feeling of helplessness by 1 billion, and the algorithm is deciding whether your entire species lives or dies.
That is the exact psychological space the books operate in. These alien executives aren't necessarily malicious on an individual level. They're just doing their jobs.
They have quarterly numbers to hit. And if hitting those numbers requires exterminating humanity for a syndicated TV show, well, that's just business.
It's terrifying because it is deeply, viscerally familiar. We all know what it feels like to be caught up in a system that doesn't view you as a human being.
Just a data point or a demographic.
Mm.
But against that incredibly bleak backdrop of gamified corporate genocide, how do you make a protagonist someone the reader actually wants to follow for thousands of pages?
Well, you have to make him fiercely, stubbornly human, which is exactly what Diniman does with the main character, Carl.
Carl is the furthest thing from a tactical action hero when we first meet him. He's literally just a regular guy.
Yeah, he works as a boat electrician in Seattle. He's actually a very calm person before the collapse.
He lives with his girlfriend. He goes to work. He plays video games. He's ordinary.
But he's carrying a lot of invisible baggage.
Yeah.
As the sources reveal, Carl had a really rough childhood, bouncing around the foster care system.
And his girlfriend, the one who owns Cat, wasn't very kind to him either.
Right. And as he gets forced deeper and deeper into this brutal dungeon, that calm exterior completely fractures.
The pressure cooker explodes.
Exactly. He starts getting incredibly angry, and he becomes this very reluctant, aggressive leader.
Now wait, I have to push back here for a second. Because you have a deeply violent, constantly swearing guy running around a dungeon in his boxers, blowing up monsters. How does that not become completely exhausting to read across 8 massive books?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, his anger is entirely justified. He isn't angry because he's a violent person. He is experiencing the sheer unfairness of the system.
Ah, so he's reacting to the trauma inflicted on everyone around him, not just himself.
Exactly. In the latest book, A Parade of Horribles, Diniman actually relies heavily on a quote from Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Rogers, that is a wild juxtaposition.
I know, right? But it's that famous piece of advice. Look for the helpers. Carl slowly realizes he absolutely cannot survive on his own.
The anger might be his fuel, but his humanity is the engine actually driving the car.
Perfectly said. The Mr. Rogers theme is about recognizing that there are people behind the scenes quietly propping the world up. Carl learns he has to rely on the helpers and, in turn, become a helper himself.
And he surrounds himself with these incredibly niche found families. Yeah. Which naturally brings us to the co-star of the series, Princess Donut.
Yes, the highly intelligent, talking Persian show cat.
Where did Diniman even get the inspiration for her?
This is one of the most revealing details from his interview. Long before the books, Diniman used to draw pictures of pets for commissions.
Oh, to make some extra money.
Yeah. And to get clients, he would attend these very niche small-town cat shows. Over time, he became like a keen sociologist of the subcultures within that specific world.
So he noticed that the specific breed of cat a person owned was like a massive tell about their personality and social class.
Precisely. He observed that the wealthier, highly articulate, maybe slightly elitist people almost always owned Persian cats. They were the old guard of the cat show world.
Meanwhile, the younger, rebellious punk rock kids at the shows were the ones bringing in the Sphinx cats, or the Lycoi, those incredible, scruffy-looking werewolf cats.
Diniman absorbed that complex social dynamic and dropped it straight into the DNA of the books. And what's remarkable is that Donut wasn't originally supposed to be the co-star.
Really?
No. Diniman initially planned for her to enter the dungeon with Carl, get separated early on, and maybe just show up sporadically.
But he fell in love with the character.
Yeah, as he started writing her dialogue and exploring that elite show cat persona, he just couldn't let her go. He actually compares the vibe of those cat shows to Comic-Con or those massive 1980s horror movie conventions.
That warm family vibe where people are united by a common, hyper-focused love?
Exactly. You have a room full of people who might have absolutely nothing in common politically or economically, but they relax and drop their guard because of this shared obsession. Diniman masterfully weaves that exact feeling into the darkest corners of his apocalypse.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. If we look at the board right now, we have an incredibly intricate universe. Corporate alien bureaucracies, gamified mechanics, cat breed social dynamics, deep psychological arcs. Right. You would naturally assume that managing a story this sprawling requires the most rigid, meticulous outline in existence, like a detective's wall covered in red string and pushpins.
But it's actually the exact opposite of that. Diniman belongs to a category of writers known in the industry as pantsers.
As in, flying by the seat of your pants.
Exactly. He does not use an outline at all.
The sources mention he has an Excel sheet to track what he calls his loaded Chekhov's guns, right? Like all the random items and unanswered lore questions.
Right, he tracks them, but he admits that when he poses a massive mystery in the story, he literally has zero idea what the answer is going to be. He discovers the answer at the exact same time the characters do.
That is wild.
He states very clearly that if he knows the ending ahead of time, he loses all joy in the writing process.
And it gets even more chaotic because he actually lets his readers on Patreon vote on major plot points while he's drafting. How does that even work?
Well, he'll present options to his backers, and according to Diniman, they actively try to sabotage him.
They intentionally try to screw him over.
Yeah. They look at the choices and pick the most bizarre, difficult-to-write option just to see him sweat. Like in Book 6, The Eye of the Bedlam Bride, the voters force the narrative to send the characters to Cuba.
Out of anywhere on the entire planet, Cuba.
Right, and Diniman knew absolutely nothing about Cuba. The setting was suddenly thrust upon him.
So he had to go down massive YouTube research rabbit holes just to accurately write the geography and culture.
Exactly. In another instance, readers voted for an item called the Dungeon Anarchist's Cookbook to be a major prize, which completely altered the trajectory of the overarching plot.
Okay, I have to be honest here. Handing the steering wheel of your massive multi-book universe over to internet trolls sounds like a guaranteed recipe for a chaotic disaster.
This raises an important question, right? How does the story not completely fall apart?
Exactly. It should just collapse into disjointed nonsense.
The secret is his revision process. It is exceptionally brutal. When people hear pantsing, they picture a writer breezing through a first draft and hitting publish. But Diniman writes hundreds of thousands of extra words per book that the public never sees.
So it's an iceberg. He's writing scenes from alternate points of view just to check if the psychology makes sense.
Yes. He will write the exact same scene 3 or 4 times. He even uses the robotic text-to-speech accessibility voice in Microsoft Word to read the entire manuscript back to him.
Oh, to check the sentence flow. Hearing it in a flat robot voice helps him find clunky rhythms his eyes would just gloss over.
Exactly. And after all that internal auditing, the Patreon community reads the draft and gives him unfiltered feedback. He rewrites based on their reactions, and only then does it go to a professional editor.
So his core belief is that unsuccessful books don't usually lack good ideas. They just lack this rigorous level of polish.
Precisely. And that unique ability to adapt to chaos in his writing process is the exact same survival trait he used to navigate the business side of the publishing industry.
Because he completely broke the mold on how a franchise like this gets distributed. He started self-publishing in 2017 with Dominion of Blades, right?
He did, but as Dungeon Crawler Coral exploded, he adopted a brilliant hybrid publishing model. He negotiates to keep the most lucrative piece for himself, the ebook rights.
Which he self-publishes on Amazon, but then he licenses the physical print rights to Ace, which is a major imprint of Penguin Random House,
allowing his books to get into brick-and-mortar stores globally. And finally, he licenses the audio rights to Audible.
And we really have to talk about the audio component, because the audiobook was the real catalyst here.
Oh, absolutely. The narrator, Jeff Hayes, doesn't just read the book, he acts it out.
Right. Diniman notes that when listeners first heard Hayes' highly specific, bombastic voice for Princess Donut, the community just lost their minds.
They even went on to produce a full-cast audio immersion tunnel version through sound booth theater, complete with sound effects.
And that success brought Hollywood knocking. But Diniman had a notoriously strict rule for the Peacock deal, right?
Yes. He flatly refused to sell the IP to any producer or executive who hadn't personally read and loved the actual books.
Which is almost unheard of in Hollywood. Most authors just take the check.
But this fiercely protective instinct is heavily rooted in his personal background. Dinнимan was an army brat. He moved around constantly as a kid.
Always a new kid at new schools, new bases.
It made him a bit of a loner, but it also forced him to become an acute observer of people. Which makes sense when you learn his first real foray into writing was G.I. Joe fanfiction about the villain, Destro.
He was exploring the psychological motivations of a cartoon villain before he even knew what world building was.
And he's still utilizing those exact same childhood instincts today.
Speaking of his instincts, there is a detail about how he handles writer's block that I found so fascinating.
The non-canon scenes.
Yes. Whenever he is completely stuck, he just opens a blank document and writes a bonkers scene where he brutally kills off Carl or Donut for fun, just completely destroys his own creations.
It's a brilliant psychological release valve. It completely removes the pressure of expectation, so he can go back to writing the actual story.
So what does this all mean? We've traced the journey of a kid writing psychological profiles of his G.I. Joes, who grew up to blend 80s horror sensibilities, internet subcultures, and anti-corporate themes into a massive lit RPG empire.
He constructed a universe out of the disparate things he genuinely loves. And there's one final, surprising detail from the sources that brings this entire thematic journey together.
The hippo connection.
Yes. Dinнимan is a massive hippo enthusiast. If you look at the dedication page of the very first Carl book, it is dedicated to Fiona the hippo at the Cincinnati Zoo.
Fiona was born premature, right? Everyone expected her to die, but the zoo fought to keep her alive.
Exactly. To a casual reader, it looks like a bizarre internet joke, but it's deeply sincere. Dinнимan states that Fiona's story is the ultimate metaphor for Carl himself.
A story of surviving against absolutely impossible odds.
The sheer, stubborn will to survive when the entire universe has decided you shouldn't.
That casts the whole series in such a hopeful light. From a seemingly random dedication to the beating heart of a multimedia franchise. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder.
If your life was suddenly gamified tomorrow by a giant, uncaring alien corporation...
Exactly. What incredibly niche hobby, random skill, or seemingly useless piece of trivia that you possess would become your ultimate survival tool?
Whatever it is, you better hope it's as fiercely loyal as a Persian showcat.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today. Keep surviving out there.